Join the stars of the Ancient Aliens TV show, Eric Von Doniken, as he returns to Manchester after an amazing response to his last presentation. David Childress will guide you through the evidence left behind. Mike Barrow will take you to other worlds, where Nick Pope will present the real X-Files. Paula Harris will share incredible testimonies. It's time to believe and raise consciousness. Join like-minded souls on Saturday, June 23rd, 2018 for Awakening. What do you believe?
Welcome, everyone. This is X-Man John DeSouza coming to you from the lush deserts of Arizona, from the secret site under the Grand Canyon to the haunted western town of Bisbee to the red mystic mountains of Sedona, like a blazing dirt devil tearing through the old landscape and piercing the veil. Thanks for joining me here on the Kevin Moore Show, the most important show in alternative community today. Thanks, Kevin.
I love it. Thank you for introducing your show, man. That's so cool. John, it is a pleasure to have you on. It really is. And you're actually going to be in my documentary, They Call Us Channelers. So that's going to be amazing. I'm just going to say this, right? When I first was looking at booking you on, it was for the UFO side, but what we're going to discuss today is a completely different side to your work, which is your new book, which is Clear Hearers.
Excellent.
So, just before we get into that book as well, just tell us a bit about yourself, because you've got a very interesting background as well.
Yes, for your audience, they know me as John DeSouza, the X-Man. I was an FBI special agent in the Federal Bureau of Investigation for over 20 years. And I was I had a top secret security clearance. I worked in the global war on terrorism, violent crimes as well. I worked a lot of high profile, very well-known cases that it's very easy to talk about because they were all in the newspapers at all times. And during that time, also during my time in the FBI, I also collected what I like to call the real X-Files, which I talk about in the books that I have published since that time. I left the FBI in 2013 before they had all these corruption problems that they have currently right now. So I'm very glad about that. And I wrote several books. I wrote the Para Investigators, the Extra-Dimensionals, and my latest book, the Clear Hearers. And those are all on paranormal topics, alternative realities, but they're all nonfiction because all this stuff is real. It is true.
Absolutely.
That's what I found out in my investigations.
Absolutely. And you've got your own radio show as well?
Not yet. I'm just practicing for it, Kevin. That's whenever I get the chance.
Well, you're pretty. Yeah, I think you should have. That introduction was perfect. Also, just to let people know as well, that we are going to film on location in the USA, and we'll be doing a video interview. So this is audio just for now. What got you into the paranormal then?
What got me into the paranormal were my own experiences long before I joined the FBI, even as a child. And I'll tell you, when I was about 10 years old, I had my first UFO observation experience, which I can tell you was just me as a 10-year-old boy at a party with a bunch of other little kids. It was way past our bedtime. We were in this huge rented hall in New York City, and we ran out into the night, deserted streets of New York City. Kids that should have been in bed, and instead we were out there playing tag and Rigolevio and very spirited games. One of the kids hit me in the stomach. I fell down on the sidewalk. one of the other kids said, "Oh, he's really hurt." So they all ran back to the rented hall a mile away from where we were, and just took off. And I was left there by myself, looking up at a very starry sky, very beautiful sky. And I was looking up at a black ink cloud. I saw a black ink cloud up in the sky, like the kind of squid would give off in the water when you try to grab it. And from the bottom of this black ink cloud came these spotlights, emerged some spotlights, and then like the old-fashioned UFO disc-shaped UFO appeared metallic with lights spinning in the bottom, and it came down towards me, and it hit me with that bluish green spotlight that I've seen. I've heard from so many eyewitnesses in the years since. That spotlight hit me and just went right through me, like it was scanning everything in my being. And I just there were two girls that showed up on my left side, and they were looking up at the same thing I was, and they were screaming, holding on to each other. And one of the girls said to me, screamed at me, "Little boy, you better run home. The world might be ending." And so she's kind of like she woke me up out of a stupor. And I took a step back, and the thing changed its mind at the same time and reversed course and started going back up into that black ink cloud. And then I just booked out of there and ran back to where my parents were to tell them about the experience. That didn't go too well, but apparently the disc collected whatever information it needed and took it to wherever it had to, because a week later I had my first contact experience. When I was home, again, I was 10 years old, living asleep in my parents' home, and I was in bed, and I felt the room suddenly changed. It was late at night, about 3 a.m, and the room suddenly changed temperature, feeling, everything changed in the room, and I stiffened up like a board. And then I had what I felt like were little children had come to grab my feet and my head and lifted me up like a board, but one that was very light for some reason. And they were able to lift me up, and they climbed upon nothing. And I saw the ceiling coming closer and closer to me. And then what I assumed were these two little children seemed to be passing right through the ceiling easily. And they tried to bring me through, and my forehead hit the ceiling a couple of times, and it wouldn't go through. And they lowered me, and I stayed wherever in the air they lowered me to. And they then just examined the spot on the ceiling. And as they kept bumping me against the ceiling, I was able to move my neck more and more. And I was able to twist my neck enough to look over into my parents' bedroom, which was right next to mine, but the door was wide open, and I could see on the ground two of those childish figures holding their hands over my parents' bed, and looked like my parents were trying to wake up, but they couldn't. And they were holding their hands over it, and I could see now that these were not children. These were what appeared to me, somehow I knew they were alien figures. Their heads were larger, had a certain sort of shape to them, and their bodies were very slender, and they were small, and they appeared to have like a grayish pallor to them. And then one of them turned towards me, and I saw them, and I saw locked eyes with these eyes that were these almond-shaped sort of black wraparound eyes, and I locked gazes with that creature, and I heard the only words I heard from them at that time was, I heard, "He's awake." And as soon as I heard those words, it was like a cord was cut, and I just fell all the way down into my bed like a sack of potatoes, and they were gone. They were gone completely. And I was just sitting there thinking thinking how to wake up my dad without getting him upset. And then I just fell asleep. And in the morning, all the adults were shuffling around the room, and they were deciding what kind of story to come up with for what happened in the home that night. So those were my first experiences with the paranormal as a child, basically. And it woke up in me, those experiences woke up in me a desire to become a professional, a real investigator, and to get to the bottom of what these things are and what they could be. And I feel like it ultimately helped lead me towards becoming an FBI agent.
Wow, just thank you for sharing that story there. That is amazing. And have you been able to talk to your family about what happened then at all? Have you had that discussion with them?
Oh, we had that discussion that night, that morning, I should say. There were about 4 or 5 adults in the home. Well, yeah, 5 adults in the home, including my parents. And it turned out they all shared a a lucid dream of being abducted by these four beings that I saw in the home. And they were all being led along on a black rope that was around their necks, and they were being led across an alien sort of landscape towards a black gleaming, and they all had this same dream. They shared this dream, and this towards this black immense structure, and they started hearing thunder in the skies, and this in this sort of reddish, pinkish sky, and it seemed the thunder seemed to frighten. It was just they heard just this tremendous loud thunder, and it seemed to frighten the creatures that were pulling them along. And the louder it got, and I told them, for some reason it occurred to me that the thunder they were hearing was my forehead banging against the ceiling. And I told them that's what it was. And I told them those were not, because they had decided that this was a demonic attack. They were very religious, extremely religious, and they decided that this was a demonic attack on the home. And I was trying to explain to them this was not, these were aliens, these were not demonic entities or whatever they decided to call them. And I tried to explain to them what happened, and the alien creatures became disturbed when they heard this loud booming sort of thunder again and again and again. And they finally, my dad pulled loose from the rope, and they all went towards some kind of a light. And then they came back home, and here they were. So that was it. And they listened patiently to my story, my explanation, and then they told me, well, okay, then it's all settled. This was a demonic attack, and they went about ransacking my father's home for what they call a guilty trinket, some sort of charm or something that was introduced into the home that brought in demonic influences, because that's what their sect believed in. That was, and I tell this story in my book, The Extra-Dimensionals, because it was one of my formative experiences in the paranormal. And they tore my dad's home apart, and I believe my dad actually went down to some corner store and bought like a Celtic rune charm and threw it under some linoleum so they could find it and they could stop tearing his home apart. And they did find the Celtic rune charm, and they paraded it in front of me to show me that they were right, that it had been a demonic attack on the home. And that was basically the end of that experience. That was how they resolved it in their mind, because like I said, they were militantly religious in their outviews, and that was all they were going to deal with.
So how much do you refer back to that experience? I mean, does that ever come up much in the person that you are now? I mean, obviously this is a big experience in your life. Did you go through any shifts at the time when this happened, that you look back now and you say, you know what, there was a voice that came to me around that time, or there was some shift that I was going through when that event happened?
Yeah, absolutely. It always comes back to me during investigations and during, especially into the paranormal and paranormal incidences, which I had many of, especially when I first got into the FBI. For those who may not know, several of my cases, from my early time in the FBI, as I became deeply involved with the paranormal and ufology by happenstance, I guess. Several of my cases were used by Chris Carter and the X-Files for when they started this new show called the X-Files in the 90s. And I actually got in a little bit of trouble for that. There was an inquisition put together at the FBI for who gave details of my cases to Chris Carter and the FBI. Chris Carter was actually questioned about that, and so was I. And both of us were able to say we never had contact. So whoever gave them details of my cases wasn't me. And I never did find out who it was. Chris Carter was ultimately able to show that he had gotten retired FBI agents to consult with him, which is perfectly fine. There's no problem with that. But I was definitely not allowed as a current active FBI agent. I was not allowed to do that sort of thing. So I was able to also show that I didn't have any direct connection with the X-Files at that time. But unfortunately, after the Inquisition, I was given the nickname the X-Files Man or the X-Man, and I was told I was demoted from G-Man to X-Man.
Right.
So.
Right. Wow. It's your story is just absolutely incredible. And did you have kind of a top secret clearance then? Did you within the FBI, or how does that work?
Yes. Every FBI agent has top secret clearance at the FBI, and any other compartmentalized clearance that they need, depending on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, we have that sort of thing. But I can tell you, having gone through all of the psychological tests and everything else that they do to allow you to get to that level of clearance, I can tell you that they do not, and they may have changed this based on my case, but they do not ask about, they ask you if you've had any incidences of mental illness. They ask you many, many things for psychological profile, but they don't ask about supernatural experiences that you have gone through. So that was not ever something that had to come up in my background. It was not a part of normal questioning or normal queries to get to the level of top secret security clearance.
Absolutely. And you had a badge number as well. People could call in and they would be able to pull up your details. I mean, I don't know how that works in America.
My badge number is 10585. And whenever I do whenever I do television or video interviews, I always have my badge is actually on a frame, on a plaque displayed right over my shoulder on my right side. And it's always there because that's my FBI badge number forever. It's assigned forever. And it's 10585. And I always tell people as a PSA, don't ever open the door for anyone claiming to be a CIA or an FBI or whatever they're claiming. You just get their name and their badge number, John DeSouza, 10585, because that's public information. They can give that, they should give that to anybody for any reason, any public reason. And then you take that information and you call their headquarters. 202 area code is Washington, D.C. Their headquarters is always in Washington, D.C., pretty much almost always, except for CIA. They're in Langley, Virginia. But you call their headquarters and you say, with that name and that badge number, you say, is this person part of your agency? Are they? And you can find out pretty quickly. But I always recommend don't talk to anybody who claims to be from some federal or global agency without verifying that they are who they say they are. Very important. That way you avoid fakesters and you avoid the men in black also.
Yes,
who are in this area.
Right. Absolutely. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. And again, in the FBI, did the FBI deal with UFO cases then? Is that something they would do?
Yes, they would. And because the FBI was always the premier sort of law enforcement agency over the United States. And so when we would get requests for police cooperation or for police assistance, we would give that assistance. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter if something was a violent crime or a cattle mutilation case or a UFO case or a case that had to do with extrasensory perception. They all had to be treated as serious investigative queries. And if anybody wants to see what I'm talking about, it's very easy. You just go to vault.fbi.gov. And then you go right to that site, and that is the public archive of all declassified cases from the FBI. Declassified because of age. So like 50 years old or older, those cases, or 40 years old or older. And those cases are all declassified. They're dumped right there on the internet, vault.fbi.gov. Then you go to this giant tab on the right side that says unexplained phenomena. And also next to that tab is also JFK assassination. You can go to JFK. There's a lot. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of documents. But for our purposes, you go to the tab that says Unexplained Phenomena. You click on that, and you open up all the supernatural paranormal cases investigated by the FBI to their conclusion in every case over many, many years. And that's where you'll find cattle mutilations. It's apparently was a big thing in the western states, Montana, Utah, Wyoming, Alaska even. That's something that's been a very big area of investigation. UFOs, it's also another area. Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa is also under there too, and there's many other paranormal areas of extrasensory perception is also another tab under that tab that opens up many thousands and thousands of investigative files there for people to peruse. But if you click on UFOs, then it opens up many groups of other UFO documents, many groups. And so if you go to group number 1 under UFOs, you go to group number 1, then you will go to open that up and then go to page 22 in group number 1 under UFO. And if you go to page 22, you will see the single most important document written by an FBI agent, which I review in my book, The Extradimensionals, which is titled A Memorandum of Importance. It is a one-page report. There's no strikeouts on this. That's one of the amazing things. There's no strikeouts on this. It's a one-page document that says on page 22, and you can download it for free. All of these documents are downloadable for free. Anyone can get them and download them. And it says at the top, July 7th, 1947. Oh, sorry, July 8th. That's when he wrote it, 1947. And this was written by an FBI agent who was himself a scientist. And he's writing to the scientific community. And he's writing because the scientific community had been putting out bulletins saying, somebody explained to us this giant wave of UFOs that was happening in the summer of 1947. And somebody tell us what this is. And so he wrote this memo because he said he had an informant. And his informant is supernormal, which is an old-timey word for paranormal. And he says his informant told him the following 8 conclusions. And primary among them is that alien visitors are here for peaceful purposes. They're not here to harm anyone. But if we send our jet planes after them, it would be catastrophic for us. Also, he told us that UFOs are empty. There's no one inside of them. They are actually just accompanying alien visitors who come here. Then he also said in this document, alien visitors are not physical beings from our physical universe. They are not from the next solar system over, next galaxy over. They're not like human beings. They don't lock themselves into tin cans and sail across the galaxies. That's not what they're doing. He said instead they are utilizing gateways. They are from other levels, other dimensions of reality, where they change their vibration to match our physical vibration for short periods of time. That's how they appear here. It's more like wormholes, gateways, that sort of thing. It's not physical travel the way we think of it. And the UFOs are the same thing. They arrive here from other dimensions and they appear here. So that our entire interpretation of alien visitors appears to have been incorrect.
Yeah. And that's been the way for a long time, I feel. I think the nuts and bolts research have done their part, and I think it's going in another direction now, isn't it, where it's all about the multidimensional reality.
And that's what it's all about and completely about. That's why I wrote my book, The Extradimensionals, to explain what this reality is really all about, because every case I've investigated, every case I've looked into has breadcrumbs of this reality in it. Or as part of it.
Could there be so many different dimensional realities, so many different Earths out there, in a sense, multi-dimensional universes? Maybe there's billions, right? And just some of those different dimensions are coming through, bleeding through, that they're able to travel through, and we're seeing the results of that.
Exactly.
For example, why a camera can take a picture and there's something in the sky, and then all of a sudden we look with our own eyes, it's not there.
Right, exactly. And as I say always, in my books, the Earth is primarily not a planet. Primarily, the Earth is a gateway. It is a way station. It is the planet of 1,000 galaxies because, of course, we're not alone. We're definitely not alone. However, where they are coming from is not from here. They are not coming from our outer space, our physical outer space. They are coming through here all the time, and they are contacting people all the time. And they leave again through the same way they come, through these interdimensional gateways, these wormholes, these passages from other dimensions.
But when they contact people, are they in tune with some sort of soul connection with those people? Are they in tune with something that's beyond their understanding, that they're connecting with people because they recognize the consciousness or the soul of that person is the same soul from their galaxy?
Yes, exactly. They recognize something in that person, something that they connect with. And as a matter of fact, that's what they're seeking, whether they are altruistic alien visitors or malevolent alien visitors. Both sides seek the same thing. They seek connection to human souls. It's important to them. It's something that they seek out, they need, and they need very badly. And that's why we see this phenomena of contact cases, abduction cases. This stuff is only increasing. It has not leveled off. It increases more and more, and we're approaching some kind of crescendo where we're going to find out that all this stuff truly is extra-dimensional, and that even the contact experiences that people have and abduction experiences that people have. What I found in my cases, my investigations have led me to the investigative conclusion that it appears that even during those experiences, rather than the alien visitors coming to our physicality, what they are possibly doing is that they are converting these people, these contactees, into an extra-dimensional reality that they control in an absolute way, and that they are able to manipulate in an absolute way too. And if you investigate these cases individually, one by one, especially even the most famous ones like Travis Walton, Betty and Barney Hill, all of these cases, you find a lot of evidence for the extra-dimensional hypothesis as far as what you just talked about, Kevin, the consciousness contact, the consciousness connection that is made with these individuals that somehow, at least temporarily, converts the individual to another reality.
Or are they converting their consciousness to another reality? Is it not the body they're converting?
Yes.
Are they able to convert consciousness? So when we talk about
and the
maybe
body follows the mind,
and the body follows. So if we are received as a consciousness, and we talk about we live in a multidimensional reality, and that we're continuously traveling to different realities as we change our perception and create our reality into a new dimension. Is it not our body that changes, but something called a consciousness that's changing? So it's that which is in the body that changes, this light, that's what I call the consciousness. That's the thing that's changing, not the actual physical reality of what this is. I don't know if I'm explaining it very well.
No, you are, because the only missing piece you got there is that the physical reality is just a poor shadow of the consciousness, of the conscious reality, which is manipulated. That's the thing that people don't get, because we're solid. We're so solid, and we're so based on the solid world that we don't understand that the solid world is just a shadow. It's a shadow of the conscious reality that is.
Isn't that interesting? Because I've interviewed 45 people for my documentary so far called They Call Us Channelers. I'm going back to the US in April for another 90 days of interviews, which you're included in. And you know what the main message that's come through for this documentary is that we live in a multi-dimensional reality. Every time I ask the channelers, why is this coming through all the time? I want to talk about something else. And all they say is, it's time to know this.
Yes, absolutely. And it is true, because we live in a world where we are constantly misdirected. We are told that if you want to contact, and there's so much energy and resources invested in keeping us looking in the wrong direction. All this stuff towards space travel, towards exploration of outer space. Oh, we've got a SETI who's going to get signals from the alien visitors here in outer space. Oh, keep looking up, everybody. Keep looking up. We're going to contact life on other planets by locking ourselves in tin cans and shooting them across the galaxies. Well, no, that's absolutely wrong. You have more chance of contacting the alien visitors going into a nice deep meditation than you do by that way than by locking yourself to some tin can and shooting it across the galaxies.
Well, what if in this reality, in this galaxy that we're in right now, in this multidimensional reality that's our focus, what if in this galaxy, this universe, there isn't that much life out there, but in other multidimensional realities there is?
Exactly. Because we know they're not in our reality for whatever reason, and we don't know really the reason. I mean, we can see that there was a time when there were many alien races on other planets. We can see the structures. We can see the structures on Mars. We can see the structures on the moon and other places. We can see that there are ruins there that. All over the place, and including on Earth, we see these megalithic structures that could not have been made by humans, not even on their best day. And so there was a time, probably before the history of man, when alien races were very easily able to exist in our physical reality. But something changed. Something changed. I don't know what it was ultimately, but something happened that now precludes them from being here in a permanent presence in large numbers. Because Fermi's paradox says so. If they were here in our physical reality, out here, they would be here by now in large, overt numbers, doing open commerce, doing open instead of the sort of peekaboo phenomena that we have now.
So maybe those who see them are also ones who are shifting in between different parallel universes. So when you have a sighting, you're actually on another parallel timeline in the same timeline, but on another parallel universe. And once that experience is over, then you're kind of hopping back to this parallel timeline.
Exactly. But they feel like they never left, and that's why
because it's the consciousness that's shifting, not the physical body.
Yes, but the physical body does follow the mind, does follow the consciousness. That's the little piece that people tend to miss all the time, because we're so tricked into believing that our solid reality is a real reality. And it's not. It melts away and it follows the consciousness. That's the thing. That's why you usually don't leave a body behind when you shift through these different conscious states and these extra dimensional realities. That's the amazing part.
Okay, so we've got nations that are now India and China, which are now going to go, that want to go to the moon and beyond. Do you think that they're looking for alien tech that's been left behind?
Yes, that is the real reason. That's one of the real agendas behind space travel. Also, the weaponization of outer space, the space around the Earth, is another true agenda. But because the nations are seeking what they always seek, which is power. They seek power. So they want to mine these substances. They want to find these precious substances. They want to find alien tech, which is out there. They know it's out there. Why? Because there were alien civilizations out there before, even though we only see ruins now. But even in those ruins, there's going to be alien tech that's available to them. The same thing that they're finding in Antarctica right now. And that's what they want, because they know that gives them power. So they will continue to talk about, different reasons for outer space travel, altruistic reasons and things. But those are not the true reasons. And so that's another reason why they want us always pointed in the wrong direction, looking towards outer space, looking towards alien visitors that are on other planets here. When they're not. They're looking for that alien tech. They're looking for that advantage that they can get. And I'll tell you what else. I don't know if those planets, those nations will be allowed to go to the moon. If people don't know, every American president since 1977 has always announced that we were going to go back to the moon. And it never, including Reagan, including Jimmy Carter, they always announce we're going to go back to the moon and make a lot of noise about it. And Trump has also said it, the same thing, and now, and ultimately we weren't allowed to, and I'm thinking that China and India ultimately will not be allowed to go there either, because there's some kind of power, preeminent elite power and control that has forbidden us from going to the moon. And maybe that's because the activity on the dark side has grown, has gotten greater, and there's stuff going on that's they don't want to be discovered by the nations because they can't trust them to keep it secret at this point with all the technology that we have at this point. So that's my feeling about there's a chance no nation will be allowed to go to the moon anymore.
It's such an interesting debate. It really is, and and again, people that are flat earthers, in a sense, when you look at Elon Musk's car that's floating out there right now with the mannequin, it looked pretty round to me. But there's everyone's got a view, haven't they, on something in regards to this field.
Yes, but pretty much everyone. No matter how wacky their theories may seem prima facie, they have to be able to show some evidence, like Jose Escamilla, for instance, who does all the great work on showing what's really going on the moon, especially on the dark side, with all the structures and everything. And he will take those photos that have been manipulated by NASA, because that's basically their real job at this point, is just to fake all the satellite imagery of the moon, Mars, and other places that show real signs of civilization.
Yes.
And you have to be able to reverse that fakery and show what's really happening up there. That's the work that Scamilla has done. And I haven't seen anything equivalent from anybody who indulges in flat Earth. I don't even like to say the words.
I know. But maybe then in another multi-dimensional reality, it is flat. Who knows, right? Maybe they're
there you go.
Maybe they're shifting in and out, and that's their truth, because that's what they see. We create our reality, like Seth said. And you're quite a prominent figure out there right now, quite well known, and you really come across really grounded, and I really do like what you do. What's your views on some of the whistleblowers that are out there right now? Because I think there's so much crap, there's so much disinformation, there's truth mixed in and twisted out with disinformation on purpose. It's like these people are set up on purpose to give a little bit of good stuff, and the rest is rubbish.
Yes, and what people don't understand is that it is extremely important to the deep state, the NWO, the Illuminati, I call them the elite powers in control, because they are in control of global institutions. It is very important to them to control the narrative in the paranormal and ufology and anything that is supernatural, for several reasons. Because number one, they know these things are true. Number two, they use these things to their advantage, and they know that if these areas were revealed to the public at large, it would empower them and awaken them to break out of their global institutions that they use to corral the mainstream of the population. And so to them, controlling the narrative and directing the narrative in the paranormal and ufology is more important than controlling economics, than controlling militaries, controlling the socio-political landscape. It is of primary importance to them, and they are constantly throwing resources into controlling these areas. And so one of the things that they do is they put forward these disinformation agents. Very often, the disinformation agents are well-meaning people who actually believe in these areas, but they are given little what's called poison pills. They are given little items of agenda that are important for the elite powers in control to inject into the narrative of the paranormal. So, for instance, you'll have people on very widely seen shows, like the Alex Jones show, let's say, something that's right on the periphery of alternative community there, but also has a foot in popular mainstream as well, and something that's seen by millions of people. And you'll have people on there, and they'll talk about a lot of important stuff that's important for awakening people. But then they'll also, at the end, they'll throw in something about, there's child sex slaves on Mars. There's colonies of children on Mars, and they're there and they're working there right now. and they'll just throw it out there so that the next day all the newspapers will carry that Alex Jones says there's child sex slaves on Mars. He just said that on his show. And of course he never did. But this is how disinformation works.
It's the most ridiculous stuff ever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and because the worst part is there could actually be child slaves on Mars. They could actually be existing there. But what they'll do is they'll send somebody out who's ludicrous and who appears on their face to be offering no evidence, and who can then be debunked immediately by mainstream media, which also works for the elite powers in control. And that way the topic is solved. And now, if any, and they've done this in so many areas where there's slave colonies on Mars, but then they'll send these disinfo agents to talk about the colonies on Mars, the slave colonies on Mars that exist right now. And they'll make it so ludicrous and so lacking in evidence presented that the people will be immediately excoriated, debunked, and so forth by their agents in the Mockingbird media. And so what they've accomplished, they accomplished several things that way. Because what happens then is if anyone ever gets real evidence of the slave colonies on Mars, they will immediately be excoriated and put aside, regardless of how great their evidence is, because it's been covered. The entire area has now been frozen in a context of bizarreness that will persist and covering the area forever. And that's what they're looking for.
It's so clever.
That's the importance.
It's so clever.
Yes, and it's very, very important. The same thing I was asked on a show the other day. I was asked about was it really true that we had the Treaty of Grijalva? I think that's what it was called, the Treaty of Grijalva, some kind of a treaty that they said President Eisenhower met with the Greys, and he signed a treaty trading technology for the United States for human bodies in abductions. And I think it was called the Grijalva Treaty. That's what I was asked about. And they said, and there's been all evidence put out of the meeting, these crappy sort of photoshopped kind of pictures of Eisenhower shaking hands with Greys and things like that. But it was obvious fakery. So what I told them was, we can tell from the context of the last 60 years that humanity's representatives did come to some kind of accord with alien visitors where bodies have been traded, where human bodies have been traded for technology. We can tell from what's gone on, from the explosion of technology that happened after 1947. There's been this incredible explosion and acceleration of technology that suddenly happened among the nations after Roswell, right around that time. And at the same time, the disappearances of humanity increased geometrically, not arithmetically, but geometrically, to a tremendous level that has never been seen before in history. Currently, right now, in the United States, according to FBI statistics, we have an average of about 33,000 people who are disappeared, missing, with no trace, no suspects, no body, no blood splatter, just per year. Gone, just gone, 33,000. That's a tremendous, tremendous number with no explanation, no closure for the families, no investigation possible, really. And so now if you add that number, 33,000, and actually the real number, I think the last one was 37,000, that's a tremendous number of unexplained disappearances, just not possible under probabilities and statistics unless there was another force at work there. Now you add the other industrialized countries that even have larger populations than Brazil, Mexico, or comparable Canada. That's an incredible, extraordinary number start to add up. And this is every year. It's just not explainable in a material sense, in a physical sense. It's just not explainable.
No, absolutely not. Thank you so much for sharing what you have. You are so interesting, man. And I know we're well over our time right now as well. But let's try to link then the work that you've done in the UFO field to clear hearers. Why did you write this book, and what is the link for you?
Oh, well, clear hearers is kind of a separate topic and yet related because clear hearers is basically an explanation of my of an my investigation basically that started even as a child into what is known as the source of the great voice. And this is something that is, it's a voice that is really not heard, but it is felt. It is a way shower. It provides imagery, visions, affects physical outcomes. The actual word clear hearer is a new term that I coined based on clairaudience. Clairaudience is not really even an English word. It actually comes from the French because the first really recorded clear hearer was Joan of Arc of 14th century France, the teenage girl who basically saved France from going out of existence when England had basically rampaged over about 95% of France, and it was just hanging by a thread during the Hundred Years' War. And in the 14th century, a great voice came to Joan of Arc when she was about 14, 13 years old, and said to her, "You have been chosen to save France, to bring it back from extinction, which it surely will happen unless a miracle happens." And this voice showed her the imagery, showed her what would happen, that she would lead great armies, France over victory over English armies, and against incredible odds, and that she would perform this incredible miracle. And it turned out to happen just the way the voice told her. And so Clear Hearers is my own story of my own family, stories from my family archives when I was growing up, and the experiences that I had as a person that perceives that clear voice of authority that seeks a person's benefit, safety, increase. And also there's many other figures throughout history that also had clear hearing experiences. Socrates, Joan of Arc, like I said, Philip K. Dick, the great writer, actually had a public press conference about his clear hearing experiences, and it was a shocker. It was actually a shocker. You can still find that today on YouTube, where he explained how many of his stories were told to him through his clear hearing experiences. And this is a phenomena that is completely different from voice hearers. Voice hearers are people who hear confused voices, murmurings, voices that are a detriment to them. And this is, usually considered a mental condition that's treated with drugs and so forth. But clear hearing is very different. It's very different. Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, and in my book, I talk a lot about channeling. Well, from the perspective of that, clear hearing is a way of connecting with that source of the great voice, which ultimately I reveal in my book on page 145, halfway through the book, is that the source in genuine clear hearing experiences, and again, all these things function according to laws and parameters, which I lay out carefully. In order for an experience to qualify as a clear hearing experience, it has to fit these guidelines and these sort of parameters. And when it is genuine clear hearing experiences, the source of the clear hearing voice is actually the higher consciousness of the person themselves. And this book is basically an investigative file where I investigated the experiences not only of myself but of many other people across many years, and came to the same investigative conclusion that the source ultimately of this great voice that comes to help people in times of crisis, in times of dire need, sometimes to even save their lives, the source of this great clear authority voice is the highest possible consciousness of the person themselves, outside time and space.
Right.
And that is it's the version of themselves that stands in the breath of God, so to speak, trying to really...
No, I totally get what you're saying. I don't. I think it's fantastic that you're doing this work, and I'm so grateful that you're taking this chalice and kind of riding the waves as well. So as you were saying there, a prophet. I think most of the prophets. This is my truth. Most prophets were channelers. Most prophets.
Yes.
All prophets have had that ability to bring in the great voice. But again, we are a filter. We get in the way of it. Our ego gets in the way, and a lot of the great teachings that came through people were distorted, and they put their distortion in the teachings. And then again, once it gets into a religious context, it's everyone else's truth, taking the good bits out and keeping all the control bits in there.
Absolutely. And so that's why clear hearing eliminates that, because it is a version of the person themselves. And it took a lot of people, a lot of heartache and reflection to finally get to this conclusion. Because it is the person themselves, there is no giving away of that spiritual sovereignty to another entity. There is no foreign entity involved in clear hearing. It is something that is very, very different from the person, and often barely remembers what it was like to be a human being chasing after stuff. But it does love the person because it was the person at some other point in time and space. And so that is the most important thing, is that love and caring that it feels,
yes.
Even though this thing is so much further evolved from the person as an elephant is from an ant.
Of course, yes.
And yet it still cares so much about the person that it wants to do whatever it can to help them.
So, if we want to get into that voice as a clear hearer, I mean, or, in maybe some quiet, reflective time, we could sit down and wait to ask ourselves a question, whatever that may be in this present moment that's bothering us, and waiting to hear our own voice come back to us with an answer that's more intelligent than what we would normally just spew out of our mouth.
Yes. Yeah. And in the latter half of my book, The Clear Hearers, I very methodically work through the process that I followed in order to start ultimately receiving downloads from my great voice. And I go through that process and the exercises that I used and everything that was done until I ultimately became in constant contact with my great voice, which takes quite a bit of dedication to get to that point. But it is something that can be taught and can be learned.
Okay, and you explain that in the book. Now, what is the difference between the great voice and those that say they're speaking to their guides?
Well, like I say, it's a difference of personal sovereignty. I'm a big believer, and maybe that's because of the downloads I have received, but I'm a big believer in maintaining your personal sovereignty and not giving it away to entities that you're not 100% sure are for your benefit. I'm a big believer that because there are unlimited alternate realities out there, there's a lot of crazy things in the astral wildlife that exists out there. And so people have to be careful with keeping their own spiritual sovereignty. And so, guides, usually they come to you and they will prove themselves as positive beings and prove themselves, hopefully they do, but you never know. And so that's why I like clear hearing so much better than channeling, because full body.
But really, what's the difference?
The difference is, who is it that you're channeling? Who is it that you're bringing forth? And who are you giving away your personal control to? That is the difference. And that's the only difference.
That's the important thing. But let's take one, Bashar. I was with him just a few months ago, just interviewing him in person for the Channeling documentary, and this is a future aspect of him coming through. It's a future lineage of his soul. In all the 40 people plus that I interviewed, all have a connection to the essence that's coming through. It's an aspect of them having an experience as something else coming through to increase themselves by helping another aspect of themselves, which is them, increase, which increases the aspect which is coming through. So it's not as clear cut as what we think. And here's another thing I learned as well on my journey was actually that voice, you call it the clear hearer. So what would you call the voice that you said? It's called the source.
The great voice.
What about this? What about if in one moment you're connecting to one aspect of the great voice, and in another moment, unbeknown to you, when you hear it come through again, you've actually changed your reality because you've shifted your dimensional frequency and you're on a different timeline. And that great voice is another aspect, another multidimensional aspect of the great voice. What if the great voice is multidimensional?
Oh, yes, it absolutely is. And I have experiences in the book that show that.
So you're never, ever, ever really connecting to the same aspect as once which you were speaking to. You're always connecting to a different multi-dimensional aspect of the great voice. It's never the same one because we're always shifting our reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, you're right. Because I do recount experiences where I encounter the source of the great voice in different forms, sometimes as a spirit guide in the guise of a great black wolf, for instance, or another creature, and then it speaks, and I recognize that voice, that great voice. I know what it is and where it comes from. And so what you're saying is absolutely right. It is multidimensional.
It's multidimensional. Even spirit guides are multidimensional. You never connect to the same aspect of the spirit guide. It's always different multidimensional aspects because you, the receiver of that, are changing your reality all the time. So you're shifting in between different parallel universes, and hence the guide is shifting as well. What if the spirit world is multidimensional as well? Hence, when people say, I went to this type of place, or someone says to me, I went to this type and it was different, or I went to this kind of experience. What if the spirit world is multidimensional as well? It's not just one place at a time. It's actually infinite possibilities because this is an infinite multidimensional experience.
Right, absolutely, it is, and but maybe because I was in law enforcement for so long, for me, I'm always most cognizant and aware of people's personal safety and their personal sovereignty, and I think that's why I tend to be I tend to be very wary of these channeling experiences that bring up these entities and give over the control of the person's own spiritual connection into the eternal with creatures that they're not absolutely sure who they are. Maybe that's just my suspicious nature.
But are we absolutely sure what our soul is that speaks back to us as the great voice? Are we really sure what that is? It's our own voice coming back to us in our head. Right. But really, what do we really know about it in a sense on this level, where we're kind of numbed out and we've got a forget-me-not of what this truly is, so we can have this human experience? What do we really, I suppose it comes down to what feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's experiential. That's an experiential truth that you need to really go through in order to know it. And that's why I tried to put so many personal stories towards the beginning of my book, The Clear Hearers, just so that people could see that these truths are experiential and you need to really go through them to really understand them and to feel the truth of what they really are. That's really what it comes down to.
And probably this as well. In all the bits that you talk about in your book, you could make books upon books upon books just on the micro bits. Yeah, that's how deep this onion layer is. When we say, I've got all the truths now in this one book, I've got it all sorted out, and actually it's an onion layer, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole.
Oh, it definitely does, because that's how multidimensional realities are. There's always more levels to them, and the real truth is that we've been discussing all of these things, alien visitors that are extra dimensional, about these channeling experiences that are multidimensional. And, when you get to the bottom of it, the real truth is we ourselves, even as physical human beings, we also, our real identity is also multidimensional as well. That's how we connect to these things.
Yes, we do. And just very quickly, because I know we're almost at the end here of the interview, and I really appreciate you just hanging on right now. So, yes, so when you talk about in your book as well, the small voice versus the great voice, what would you say the small voice is then?
Ah, it's that's a good question, because it is, as I explain in my book, we all have the access to the great voice. We do. Most people ignore it, but we do all have access to the great voice. But we also have the what is described in the old King James Bible as the still small voice, that is in our solar plexus area, that's always with us. And what's funny about that voice is it's not really a voice at all. It's more of a prompting. It is something that our Creator planted in us, and it is a prompting. It is a feeling. It is sometimes a little kind of whispering voice that always gives us. It's a counselor. It's a counselor. It's something that gives us advice on, don't get on that plane today. I'm going to give you a tummy ache so that you won't get on that plane today. Or don't go down that dark alley. It's not a smart, go the long way around. It's not a smart idea. Don't do it. So it's a counselor. It's an advisor. Everybody has it. Now, the problem is most people ignore it, especially in this digitized, sort of constantly noisy sort of age that we live in. Most people have no problem completely ignoring their still small voice, the promptings that they get. As a matter of fact, they've got headphones on most of the time. They're completely oblivious to their still small voice and to the promptings that permanent counselor that they have, always telling them, do this, don't do that. And so it's not even a factor in their lives for the most part. And so that's one of the things that makes necessary the great voice, visits from the great voice. When a person goes so far off the track and puts their life in so much danger that actually deviates from the Creator's plan for them, or the universe's plan for them, to such a degree that the great voice has to pay them a visit. And the great voice is very, very different from the still small voice that everybody has, because it can force a person to listen. It can force a person to obey what it says. And it doesn't violate your personal sovereignty, because it is you. It is a part of you. That's the trick, because everything functions according to laws, and the universe does not do things, do divine interferences that completely cut off your free will. Yet the great voice and the clear hearers does do that. It does cut through your free will, and the only reason it's allowed to do that is because it is you.
And just very, very briefly as well, which we'll get into this more. We've got so much to cover when I see you in person, right? Which we'll have much more time. But you've listened to that voice, even as a kid. You listened to that voice, didn't you?
Yes, absolutely. When I was about 15 years old, I kind of ran away from home, and I picked the worst possible moment, and I ran into a snowstorm, which was a historic snowstorm in 79 in New York City, the one that lasted like 3 days and 3 nights, and it was like 20 feet of snow in New York City. And I just kind of walked out into the suburbs and down a stretch with hardly even a shirt and pants on, basically. And I didn't have a plan to do harm to myself, but I was just in a stupor from how upset I was with my stepmother, who wanted me basically out of my house. She wanted me out of my house. She didn't get along with me at all. And I kind of went into a stupor and just started walking in this snowstorm. And I walked a couple of miles until I began to freeze, and I fell down in a snowbank, and I was just freezing. I basically started going into a very deep, comfortable sleep, which I read later is how you freeze to death. That's how it feels. And suddenly I was basically giving up the ghost, and I heard, "Get up." And it's just like it was a sound so loud, it felt like you were standing next to the speakers at a rock concert, those 6-foot tall speakers. And it just ripped through me when the thing said to me repeatedly, "Get up." And I just said, I tried to move and I couldn't. I just said, why? And then the voice showed me images of something. I was transported in the astral to my father's house that I had left from. And in there, my dad had just received a call saying that his son's body had just been found, and his shoulders were shaking and it looked like he was crying, and he had the whiskey out, which he hadn't drank in years. And he had whiskey out, and my stepmother was in the back pacing back and forth saying that she wasn't one bit sad that he was gone. Not one bit sad. He was a no good rotten kid. And she had earlier that same day had said to me those same words in the same inflection. And something, the great voice had shown me the one thing that would motivate me, and something heated up my insides. And I started moving my hands and feet, little bits. And I started moving my limbs, and I started crawling out of there. And the thing said one last time, get up. And I did. I started getting up, and then I started moving, and that turned into a crawl and a walk. And I went home and was able to go to the hospital because my extremities had been frozen, and luckily I had no permanent damage. But I would have died that night in that snowbank if that voice had not come to me at that moment, and if the voice had not known me so intimately that it knew exactly what to show me that scene of my stepmother celebrating that I had died.
God.
And that my body had been found. It knew exactly what to show me to heat me up in order to get me moving again.
And again, that's just one story of a number of stories which we'll cover more in detail, including going back to UFO work as well when we see you for an extreme interview. Do you know what, John? It's such a pleasure to have you on. What is your website as well?
My website is johntamabooks.com, johntamabooks.com, and anybody can find me on Facebook under my name, John DeSouza, on Facebook, Twitter, and on Amazon as well for my books under John DeSouza, DeSouza. And my stuff is all over for sure.
Okay, so we've been linking up your website throughout this interview. It's been coming up on the screen throughout this interview. We're going to link all those details up in the description underneath this video as well. John, what would be your final message to the audience?
My final message is to the audience, especially to your audience, Kevin, is they are lying to you. And when I say they, I mean the governments, not just the United States and UK, but all the governments are lying to us. They have been lying to us. They are trying to keep control for the elite powers and control over ufology, over the paranormal, because if we find out what's really been going on about the technologies that they have been withholding from us, all the cures for disease that they've been withholding from us, and that they have been using themselves, there will be a revolution that will happen. And so we need to stop worshiping at the altar of government. We need to stop prostrating ourselves before Washington, D.C. or London or any of the other places that have no answers for us. And we need to listen to each other. We need to listen to each other. We need to listen to each other and vet each other to know that our information is real, that we are not disinfo agents, and we need to learn a good process for doing that and teach each other who is real and who is not in this area.
Well, John, you are a fascinating man. I can't wait to meet you in person, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kevin. Awesome time with you and your audience. Thanks.